Here we are once again, asking that age-old question, to be or not to be. I don't know if that's the age-old question, but we're going to have a very interesting conversation today with an expert on Shakespeare, a director, an actor, a teacher, who's bringing some very interesting ideas about the ways that we overlook theater, and particularly Shakespeare in many ways, and how we can make it much more palatable and much more open to the masses. So put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation, because it's time once again for Coffee Breaks with Steve. Music makes me want to dance sometimes. I was going to say good morning, and it is morning right now as we are live on the West Coast, but good Saturday to you all, and welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve. I'm Steve, and if you are back here rejoining us, as I know several of you are, I'm looking at the comments, want to say thank you for being here this morning, and if you are tuning in for the very first time, welcome, and thanks for joining us. If you're watching live, it is Saturday, February 24th, 2024. And if you're tuning in later on, we want to welcome you as well. You can still take part in the conversation, even if you're tuning in and watching this later on. Hi, Shalane. I see Jerry Thompson is here. Kathy Garlick. All right. Ooh, he almost drank. Do you want me to drink, Shalane? Let's do it. I hope you have your cup of beverage with you, whatever it may be and wherever you are. Oh, it's been an interesting week, a busy week in so many different ways. And, I actually like it that way. I think, as most of you know, Carol and I both retired, whatever that means, a couple of years ago now. And what I am really enjoying about retirement, it was part of our plan, is that we have not been dormant during retirement. Part of our plan for retirement was to travel. We've had a chance to do some of that. We plan on doing more. Of course, we went into retirement, COVID was still going on. So that limited some things, but we've still been able to get some travel in. We've got some more planned for this year, but we've also stayed active in working and volunteering, but in different ways than what we did before we retired. So we did an episode some months back about the R word and what it meant and how different people deal with it. So, yeah, so welcome all of you. We're going to have another fun conversation today, and I'll tell you more about our guest in a few minutes. But yeah, just how's your week gone? I'd love to hear from people as we're sitting around our virtual coffee table about what kind of week you've had. If you've had some good times, if you've had some challenging times, let us know what you can in the chat and see if anybody else is joining here. If you are joining the conversation this morning, make sure you say hi in the chat so we know you're here. And especially if you are joining us for the first time, make sure that you say hello so we can welcome you. Let us know what brought you here if you're here for the first time, and where you're tuning in from. And among our regulars, it's always good to see you. It's always good to have you part of the conversation. Make sure that you are part of the conversation. Yeah, so I wanted to share in our sweet and savory segment today. It was interesting because I was preparing for this, and first of all, and we'll talk about this at the end of the show as well, I'm going to be gone next Saturday. We're not going to have a coffee breaks next Saturday. And it's probably the only week for a while in the grand mix of things that there will not be an episode. And it's because literally Carol and I will be in flight on our way to the East Coast next Saturday morning. So a little bit difficult. I haven't yet figured out a reasonable way to broadcast live from an airliner. It doesn't mean it can't be done, but not ready to try that, and just deal with all of the whatevers that might go with that. But there were just, over the course of the next 2 weeks, so many birthdays to acknowledge that I did not really feel like there was time to put anything else into our sweet and savory. So today we're all about the birthdays. And the first one I want to mention is actually one that was last week, but it was the guest that we have coming up here in a few minutes celebrated a birthday last week. And so I wanted to acknowledge that as sort of a pre-introduction to our guest and say happy birthday to, and by the way, I should be playing our birthday music in the background as we are talking about this. So there's our birthday music. And I think it's coming up, maybe. There it is. Ruth Veselka, who is our guest today, celebrated a birthday a couple of days ago. So I do want to acknowledge that and say happy birthday to Ruth, and you'll get a chance to meet her in a few minutes. And then Addison Harris, who is, this always makes me feel like I'm old. She is my grandniece. She is my niece's daughter, but Addison Harris is celebrating a birthday this coming week on the 26th, a couple of days from now. And so happy birthday to Addison. Jenny Conley, a dear, dear friend and a friend of this show. She's been on Coffee Breaks with Steve more than once, and just another lovely lady celebrating a birthday this week on the 27th. Happy birthday to Jenny. Patrick Jinks, who you may recall, author, consultant, nonprofit expert, speaker, TED Talk speaker, etc., celebrating a birthday. And so happy birthday to Patrick. Karen Sparks. Karen is my aunt. By marriage, known Karen for most of my life, obviously. And she is one of those rare people who has a birthday on February 29th, which means that, she gets gets to be a little bit older every year, but she only has a birthday technically every 4 years. And this year she actually gets to celebrate her birthday on her birthday. Happy birthday to Karen. And then another one of my aunts, my Aunt Mary Kay, is celebrating a birthday on March 2nd. She is a true character and has been that in my life and the lives of our family, my siblings and I, and others in our family throughout our entire life. So many wonderful stories and memories with my Aunt Mary Kay. So happy birthday to Mary Kay. And then Christopher, my son Christopher, celebrating a birthday on March 4th. So we're going to be wishing him and celebrating with him, but bringing it here now, even though it's a couple of weeks out, celebrating because we have to catch all these birthdays that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. And then Katie Truesdale. Do you remember Katie? She is the owner of Magical Mystery Tours, been on Coffee Breaks with Steve a couple times, talk about the unique way in which she and her company do their mystery vacations. And so Katie is also celebrating a birthday early in the month of March. Happy birthday to Katie. Do you have a special day coming up in the next couple weeks that we should know about and celebrate here and acknowledge here with you? Put it in the chat so that we can do that. And if you have one coming up and maybe in sometime later in March or even later in the year and you want to make sure we know about, you can make sure that we know that and get it on our calendar and get it into the mix to celebrate with you by sending an email to cbwsteve@comcast.net. All right. Thank you for all of those celebrations and celebrating with. It's always fun to celebrate. I love celebrating birthdays. I love celebrating special days. I get to today. Last week we mentioned that my brother-in-law, Alan McCormick, celebrated a birthday, and actually get to do more celebrating with him today. So I'm looking forward to that as well. All right. Want to get to our topic and our guest today and tell you just a little bit about her and why it's going to be so much fun to hear from her. Ruth Veselka is in her 21st year as an English and drama teacher with 5 years experience in alternative education and 10 years as a drama director and advisor. Currently, Ruth is working on her master's in education technology and instruction design and is building a new alternative education program at West Valley High School in Yakima, Washington, where she's adamant that she, here's a quote from her, does not teach students so that they will be like her. She teaches students so they will be better than her. Ruth is also active as an actor and director for local theater in Yakima. Outside of teaching in community theater, Ruth loves spending time with her family and friends, especially traveling and experiencing the world. Married for 23 years, she and her husband Keith have 3 great children, ages 22 through 16, who are spread out across the country. She also loves reading, teaching, and of course, theater arts. Here then is my conversation with Ruth Veselka. Well, Ruth, welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve. Thank you for joining us here today. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me.
One of the things I think is always interesting when we're talking to people who've been involved in theater is how that first started. How did you first get involved in theater as an actor? And then how did that transition to ultimately also directing?
Well, growing up, I was an extrovert, but really I was an introvert at heart. I liked being in front of people, but I didn't like necessarily being with a large group of people. And so what I found, I think it was back in 3rd grade or no, it was 4th grade. I did a show called Really Rosie by Carol King, excuse me. And she, it was with my music teacher at the time, and she wanted us to do this little musical, and we did it, and I loved every second of it. And I kept trying to do more and more theater, but I was never really, I was doing basketball and other things. And, but when I was a senior in high school, I auditioned again thinking, well, this is kind of my last go at it. Let's try it. And I got the lead. So it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I just had a great time, and then went to college thinking, oh, I'm just going to go into pre-law and we'll see how that went. And one of my suite mates asked me to go audition with her. She didn't want to go by herself. And so I said, oh, fine, I'll go with you. And I went and I ended up getting the part. And I felt guilty for all of 30 seconds, but I really,
You
really,
beat your friend out. You beat your friend
I
out for the part that
did.
she wanted.
I did, and I felt so bad. It was Tennessee Williams' Glass Menagerie, and
Oh,
I ended up, because I was so young at the time, I ended up being the understudy, and then just kind of kept rising to the top, which was great. Small, big fish, small pond, but it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. And then my junior year, I found out about the National Shakespeare Conservatory,
yeah.
which is out in New York. And so I went and did their summer program. And that's really, I mean, I had liked Shakespeare before, but that's really when I fell in love with Shakespeare, acting wise.
At what point in your study of Shakespeare did you start to really become aware? Was that part of the teaching that you got, or was there additional research that you did along the way that kind of led you to that greater understanding of how Shakespeare, getting past some of those sticking points and how Shakespeare should be presented?
Yeah, I think it started with just with my own sense of language, and then the loss of it when I finally just was there for the story. It's almost like learning a foreign language where you get so immersed in it that suddenly you're not even hearing the language anymore. You're just so invested in the story itself. Um, and kind of like learning a foreign language when you're in that country, the language sometimes tends to go to the side because you're so invested in the culture and the country and where you are. And Shakespeare's stories are something truly to be invested in. They are they're just so meaningful. I think too that they pull us in a way that that many authors try to emulate, and they do try and emulate. There are over close to 200 films that are based on Shakespeare's plays, that are attributed to Shakespeare's plays,
Yeah.
but that aren't true, straight up with the language, focused on the plays itself. And so that was one piece. I think the second piece um, was when I was at the National Shakespeare Conservatory and really was able to see that Shakespeare just tells it like it is. We're there. This is the language. This is what he's saying. It's not the subtext that we're after. It's that these characters are real. They are
Mhm.
they are images of humanity on so many different levels. And even in, say, something like A Midsummer Night's Dream, where you've got fairies and people turning into things. Well, we all act like idiots when we're in love. We all do that.
Yes.
And so it's something in um that just hit me in the sense that, playing Lady Macbeth, I thought this woman really does love her husband. Yes, it becomes an obsessive love because now she's obsessed with him being the greatest that he can be, but she loves her husband to the point where she'll do anything. And because of that, because of realizing that she's become less human by doing that, that's when she falls into madness. And I think it just is so much of who we are as human beings.
Yeah.
And that kind of spurred on my passion. But in terms of like when I realized that we kept getting caught up in it was when I started teaching Shakespeare,
Mm.
and realizing that we were teaching it to read it. And I think we missed the mark with that in terms of teaching Shakespeare. It's because it's never been meant to be read. It's always been meant to be seen. And if we're
Mm.
going to teach that kind of drama, that kind of humanity, that kind of hmm, that kind of literature, I suppose, we really need to teach it the way it was meant to be, the way it was meant to be, given to human beings. So
To
in
an
terms
audience.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of gifting that story, it really needed to be something that you listened to or something that you watched or and so I was teaching Macbeth, and I went and found every version of Macbeth that I could find.
Mm.
And we'd watch the beginnings, and then we watch pieces of the middle, and we watch, endings, and we watch all different types of these versions, talking about, okay, so what is this director trying to get the audience to say? What is this director? And then through it all, what's Shakespeare trying to have us understand about ourselves. And
Yeah.
so I think as teachers, sometimes because we ourselves don't always enjoy Shakespeare. I mean, you could sit, 10 English teachers down in a room, and you might find one that likes Shakespeare and the rest are like, not my favorite, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that we miss out on an opportunity mm, to enlighten ourselves about who we are, when we can't see what this great author has given to us. And
Yeah.
it kind of comes down to, we think that this is too old, or this is too antiquated, or we think, oh, this is classic, so we all must read it. And I think it's sad that we really miss the point of what Shakespeare has to offer us as human beings on planet
Yeah.
Earth.
What are some of those traps? What are some of the things that you've discovered in as you've taught it that we can tend to get wrong with Shakespeare, and how do we correct that?
Um, Well, we can correct it, and I'm going to start with how we can correct it, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we get wrong. But really, it's punctuation. It all comes down to punctuation, because of how the iambic pentameter is written, because of how it's written in poetry form. We miss the punctuation, and therefore we miss the purpose behind his choosing of words. Yes, he's made up quite a few of
Yeah.
those words to hit the iambic pentameter, but I think the words that he makes up, he really does think about in terms of, like, yeah, this rhymes, or yeah, this goes along with the heartbeat of the piece, but we miss the whole point behind every aspect of what he's trying to say when we don't look at the punctuation itself. So when I teach, say I'm teaching Romeo and Juliet to students, especially Act 1, Scene 1, which is really, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, it's a part of it, but it's all about sex and all about the lewdness of lust and all of that. And so, I tell them, okay, we're going to hover over the gutter. If you get the joke, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But read it punctuation to punctuation. So we even write it out as if it's a full sentence, and look at the punctuation that way, and look at the capitalization of where he capitalizes words. He gives us so many clues. And I think too, we assume that with Shakespeare, it has to be this big over the top, um, crazy acting that goes along with it. And he even said in Hamlet, do not saw the air thus. It's all about keeping it real. And I think Shakespeare was the true realist in terms of wanting to have the world see themselves for who they are. He wasn't really all about a mirror. He was all about a window
Mm.
onto the world of who we thought we could be, and who we can be in terms of humanity. He showed us the worst of humanity and the best of humanity.
Yeah.
So
Many of the productions that I've seen of Shakespeare over the years, whether they've been high school or in some cases even more professional or semi-professional community theater, where the actors are caught up in the rhythm and the meter, and that's what they have memorized. They've
right.
memorized it based on that, iambic pentameter, or whatever the meter and rhythm of that style are. And you talked about getting away from that, getting to the punctuation, but there's also elements of Shakespeare did invent words.
Yes.
And some of those now are part of our modern lexicon.
Mhm.
But he also used colloquialisms of the times. And we often say, well, he was writing in Old English. It wasn't Old English, it was early modern English.
Mhm.
But there are differences in the way certain things are spoken and certain things are phrased. And we even get mixed up at times. We were talking about, like, in Romeo and Juliet, when Juliet says, "Wherefore art thou, Romeo?" And I've heard people say,
Right.
why is she asking him where he is? He's right there. That's not what "wherefore art thou" means. It means
Right.
why.
Yes.
Why are you Romeo? And she's really kind of expressing her own anguish that he's a Capulet.
Yeah.
And that forms this
Montague.
barrier
Yes.
in their relationship. But I'm tossing out some things, and I just want to hear from you more about
Yeah.
those word and mind traps that we get stuck with.
I think all too often, because he did write. Shakespeare was kind of an interesting writer too, because he really was writing for the masses, and yet he wrote in such high speech. I felt like feel like. He has a really high regard for his audience, that even though they are for the masses, and he would throw a character that was just for them out there, you could tell, but that he wrote in such high language that he raised his audience to his level, and he used poetic language as well. The "Wherefore art thou?" I mean, that's very poetic even for his time, and I think that. While that does come some from the Middle English, from the plays that he wrote or read as a child, in his school days, or he was very much a part of the learning Greek, and so you see that in his plays as
Yes.
well. But I think that there's something to be said for the heartbeat that he writes in, and that it is that passion. And if we fall into the trap of not seeing behind those words, or of not understanding the heartbeat in those words, and just looking at the cadence, then we lose what he's saying. And so even as she's saying, "Wherefore art thou?" "Oh, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo?" If you don't stop and look at the punctuation where he puts that, if you don't stop and think about, why is she so devastated by this, then or why is she even saying this out loud, then you've
Yeah.
missed the point of the line. And that can be difficult when you're 15, 16 years old, and
Right.
the last thing you want to do is read some archaic, or what you think is archaic and out of date, verbiage. And I think
Yeah.
too, when you can sit down with freshmen, then it's usually freshmen or sophomores that read Romeo and Juliet, and say,
Yeah.
every rom-com that you have ever watched or seen starts with this Romeo and Juliet. This is where we start. And I'll be the first to admit it's not my favorite play,
Mhm.
probably because I've just taught it so much, and probably
Yeah.
because there are many pitfalls in Romeo and Juliet, that the difference between love and lust. And so
Yeah.
when I took them to their final project, instead of doing something with the play itself, I said, okay, so what's the difference between love and lust, and why is this play, why do we continue to use this to show the difference between these two? Because again, if you're watching a rom-com, they end up happily ever after. Romeo and Juliet did not. It was a tragedy. So the difference between love and lust comes when we see if you can't find patience within this relationship, then love doesn't happen. Love takes patience. And I think it comes back to Shakespeare's understanding of all the literature that he read, namely the Bible. And that was,
Mhm.
it wasn't the King James version, because that wasn't there yet. It was, but it was these pieces that he had heard from, the priests that he was raised with in the beginning of his life, through the pastors later on, when the country went to Protestantism,
Yeah.
and understanding how those things work together. I think he really, you can see his focus, or his intense wanting to learn more, or wanting to understand more about something. And I think as he writes for us to learn. So to take back to kind of this language, is that if we don't allow ourselves to understand the humanity of the person, the lines never come. And if the lines never come, we fall into the cadence, we fall out of the punctuation, and it becomes this almost monotonous spew of words, unfortunately, instead of what it's really meant to be. And that is the understanding of humanity and the human heart.
Mm. I like that. What is your advice to actors, whether they're experienced or novice, when preparing to audition, and then beyond that, you get cast, and then preparing to really try to be focused on being ready to present that
Yeah.
production in your role?
Audition it's the hardest part of any production, both for actors and for the director, because the director has, an idea of what they want to do, but they don't necessarily, it's not set in stone. It's kind of this malleable piece of clay, but they have the beauty of this idea that they want to do with this text, with this language. Um, and so when actors come in, and my audition process, from what I understand, is very different from other people's audition
Hmm.
process as a director, because I want to see actors play. I am of the school that acting is playing with the magic if. What if this happened? What if we did this? What if we did that? What could happen? What would happen? And so this idea that we're as we come together, we're finding the play together. I also look at every play, regardless of if it's Hamlet or Macbeth or anything with a major lead character. I always look at every play as an ensemble piece, because you really can't have, you can't have Hamlet without Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. You can't
That's
have
right.
Macbeth without Macduff. It's these things just don't come into play
Yeah.
without these smaller pieces. And I think it's really important that actors remember that too. That just because a director says no to you, that's not any knock on your talent. What that's saying is that in this group of people that I put together, that I think can bring my idea and my thought to life, you fit or you didn't fit. And it's painful when, someone tells you you don't fit, but it also can, hopefully remind you that that has nothing to do with your talent. That has to do
Yeah.
with the fit of the play. And I've been cast and I haven't been cast. And in fact, between, we talked about between third grade and my senior year in high school, I auditioned for plenty of things and never got cast.
Yeah.
And that's, again, that can be really, it could have been something that knocked me down, but I just kept trying because I thought, well, and I don't know what brought me to this understanding, honestly, but I just kept thinking, well, that part wasn't right for me, or I wasn't right for it. And there has to be a fit. And the director sees that as a puzzle. And so you could have, the greatest actor of all time, but if you don't, if all the pieces around him don't fit, it's not going to work. It's not going to be what you want it to be. And you have to trust that the director is looking at the production as a whole and not in all these little pieces. And in high
Doesn't have
schools too, sometimes, or even colleges, you think, well, I'm a senior, so I should be getting this part, or
right.
I'm this, so I should be getting this part. And really what it comes down to is that the director looks at it and says, oh, this would be a great part for this person to learn this, or this would be a great
Mhm.
part, or this part fits this person, wonderfully. And so many things they can learn or do with it. And, it wasn't, I think it was my senior year in college, and I was in a play called No Clocks in the Forest. I think that's right. And it's a play by Paul Willis. It was directed by John Blundell, who was it's a great director in Southern California. But he cast me as the oldest sister, and it's based on the Three Sisters, the mountains,
Yeah.
down in Oregon.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
played the oldest sister, and my mountain was the oldest, and the but I was also the wise one, and I kept thinking, why couldn't I get the middle sister who was supposedly the lead? Why didn't I get that? And I sat down with my director after the show, and I said, well, I was kind of hurt by that. And he said, what? He goes, Ruth, that was like, that's the greatest part. I said, well, but it wasn't the lead. And he was like, but that was the greatest part. And so it
Yeah.
really kind of struck me that it's, the best parts in plays are not always the Matildas, or sometimes it's the Trunchbulls, or sometimes
Yeah.
it's those fun, other parts that we
Exactly.
miss and don't get to play. So
Are you currently working on a show, either as a director and actor, or have anything coming up in the near future?
I do actually right now, with West Valley. This is my last year of directing high school shows with West Valley High School in Yakima, Washington. I'm right now working on lights and sound for Freaky Friday, Disney's Freaky Friday, which will, our opening day is Freaky Thursday, so February 29th.
Okay.
And
Well,
that'll
yeah.
run for 2 weekends, yeah.
That's good.
And then my final play here is a straight play called Play On, and it's really fun. It is, it's kind of my style of play. So it has a play within a play. So it's a community theater group that is putting on a play written by a community member, and she keeps coming in and changing the storyline and the characters, and it's a murder mystery, but then there's no murder in it, and it's wonderful. And I'm so excited because I kind of like doing these smaller pieces with 10 to 12 actors, because then the actors that I bring in, the high school kids that I bring in, I can really work on their acting skills with them. I can really do those things. However, I also have a big project coming up, which I'm really excited about. Also because I was gifted the rights. So a Canadian author wrote a version of The Hobbit to be shown on stage.
Okay.
And I'm so excited. I'm going to be able to be directing it at the Warehouse Theater Company in Yakima, Washington in the fall. So
That's
I'm
cool.
doing a version of The Hobbit. I'm so excited. I have fallen in love when I was teaching middle school drama. I was teaching puppetry and masks, mainly because those kids were right at the cusp of forgetting how to play, and getting so consumed with who we are that we get so nervous in front of an audience. And so these kids that come out of elementary school and would come to me, suddenly because they were in a bigger school, because it was middle school, because of hormones, because of everything that's going on in their lives, they were just terrified to be in front of a camera, to be in front of an audience, to be in front of. And so I was like, how can I get them to at least get on stage? So I thought, well, what about masks? So this was before COVID.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we worked on Greek masks and Commedia dell'arte masks.
Commedia dell'arte.
Yes, which I have to tell you a story, but hang on one sec.
Yeah, keep going.
And then I started working with puppets so that they could have their puppets above their heads. And I just fell in love with them. There is something about puppets and puppetry and masks that allow us to really play and have fun. And so I'm casting younger people, kids, more like with The Hobbit. And I'm just giddy. I'm really excited to build a Smaug puppet that goes around the audience and that theater in the round, and large trolls, oversized heads that can be I'm so excited about it. Anyway, so that's coming up. So those are the three that I'm involved in. And then I'm hoping to act at some point again.
Okay.
I think once getting out of, because being a school drama teacher and being a school drama director can really take over your life. So for 10 months out of the year, I don't, I'm just so focused on that. That gives me 2 months to kind of recuperate. I'm after 10 years of that, I'm ready to pull back and do some different things. So I'm excited to work on those types of things. But Commedia dell'arte. So my husband took me to Italy last November, not this last November, the November before, so 2022. And we went to Venice, and I met an amazing mask maker who makes masks for Commedia dell'arte plays that are still being done in Venice and around Italy. And it was an hour of my life that I just, I remember like it was yesterday. He was so amazing, and he had an interpreter, but honestly, it was again like being with Shakespeare in a foreign language. After a bit, I forgot that he was speaking Italian because he was showing us things, and I was just in the moment.
It transcends.
So yes, it does. And I think masks too transcend language.
Mm-hmm.
And so even with The Hobbit and this amazing production that I get to be a part of, sometimes when you read that book, it's, Tolkien wrote it in the 30s. And so you have some of that archaic language as well. But I think the story is such a hero's journey that kids can relate to, that it comes out of the language itself and becomes that, that amazing story of overcoming fear and odds and just putting one foot in front of the other and facing dragons. So
that's cool.
So
I have some, as we get ready to wrap this up, I have some what I call flashcard questions. Doesn't mean that you have to say the first thing that comes to your mind, but they're not ones that I've necessarily given you an opportunity to prepare for. And your answers can be fairly brief for these, but it's just interesting sometimes to toss some things out there. What is your personal opinion on whether Shakespeare was the actual author of the Shakespearean works?
I think we can debate that until it's, until we're blue in our faces. But I think in the end, we just have to say that Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. I think that you can definitely see, especially like in something like Antony and Cleopatra, you can definitely see a Marlowe-esque style. Mm-hmm. But I think Shakespeare wrote for his audiences. And I think if he had gone, it's like acting a certain character after you've seen a movie. Like you might start acting like that person just because it was so much fun to see them played on the screen or on the stage. And so I think that he might have gone to see a Marlowe play and then come back and written in the style of Marlowe. But I think that we can debate that, but we'll never know the truth. So,
Never know
you know,
for sure.
why distort why
Yeah,
distort
we can
that
get so
darkness?
distracted by that that we stop enjoying the works
Yes,
themselves.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Last one for you is, do you have a favorite Shakespeare play, either to see or to be in, and why?
Oh, that is so hard. Um, I love Macbeth, because I think Lady Macbeth is one of Shakespeare's greatest
Mm,
female characters. But I also love Twelfth Night. Um, I have a hard time saying that I like, um, Merchant of Venice just because of its anti-Semitic, um, storylines. However, I love the character of Portia. Um, I really do enjoy, um, Shakespeare's female characters. I think when he does write them well, they are some really strong women that I want to
yeah,
be like.
yeah.
But I think in terms of his plays, um, my grandfather and I, were able to share King Lear together at one point. Um, and before he passed, we then watched, um, Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium, where he talks
Mm,
about Lear and the end of
mhm.
Lear, that the greatest, you know, the greatest author and his greatest works, the only thing he says about, um, Lear is that he dies. That's it. That's the
Yeah,
ending. That's the
yeah.
culmination. And we grieve not because of his death, but we grieve because of the life lived prior to that. And I think there's something to be said for the lives that Shakespeare has created and how we can, see attributes of them in ourselves and how um, we can see the truth of humanity through them. And so I don't think I could ever choose a favorite. I might have some that I don't like more than others.
Yeah,
I'm not a Titus Andronicus fan, but you know, that's
yeah,
that
I
one was
get
a
it.
little much for me.
Yeah, I get it. Well, that's great. All of this has been wonderful. Ruth, thank you so much for taking the time to share these wonderful perspectives with us, and wish you the very best, and looking forward to seeing what you're going to continue to bring to the stage as a
Thank,
director, as an actor, and what you're going to continue to bring to your students as a teacher. So thank you
thank
very
you so
much.
much.
All right, a conversation with Ruth Veselka. I hope as I did that you found that kind of refreshing and enlightening, especially some of Ruth's perspectives regarding the way that Shakespeare wrote, and the intent, and what was how to present it in ways that break away from some of those common traps that we fall into. I loved some of the comments and things that were going on in the chat, so thank you for that. I'd love to know as well a couple of things that I would like to know if you as participants in the chat have. And one is, it's I think this is always good to ask, is what did you find what did you found? What did you find most revealing, enlightening, or just, what did you enjoy most about the conversation with Ruth? Was there something that she said? Some of you have already commented on some things, but was there something that we talked about, and there's something that she said that caused you to go, okay, that I can see now? That makes a difference. Is there something that would cause you to go, I'd love to now go back with a different frame of mind and look at some Shakespeare? And the other one is, I know some of you out here have looked into the Chelan, for one, I think Carissa as well, and maybe others. Who are some of the actors, actresses, who are some of the performers that you have found, like YouTube videos of, who are presenting Shakespeare the way that Ruth described it should be presented, who are getting away from iambic pentameter and just the da 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 element of rhythm and rhyme, and really presenting the story with the punctuation, with the feeling? Share some of those. You don't have to put the links in here. If you have time and you want to put a YouTube link in there for some of those, that's great. But maybe you just mention an actor and the monologue or soliloquy that they're presenting, and where people can find that on YouTube, because I think that would be a great follow-up to this. I will tell you, these conversations that we do, and the one that I had with Ruth Veselka, we have to edit the recordings for time. We did talk about that a little bit, and my hope is that we can get the full video up on YouTube in the near future, so that you can see the elements that we did have to edit down a bit for time. But I'd love to know your thoughts on that and your comments. All right, listen, before we break away today, yeah, that I love that one too. Shakespeare is meant to be seen, not read. I think there is a benefit, as most of us encountered in high school, of reading Shakespeare, but even that I think has to be presented in the right way. And too often English and literature teachers do not have that same familiarity as someone like Ruth, who has gone through it as an actor and a director. Before we go today, I want to share a little bit about what's coming up in the next few weeks. I already mentioned that there will not be a Coffee Breaks with Steve next week because I'm going to be in the sky and short of blowing a door off the airplane, as some of you had suggested. I don't really have a good idea of how to make that happen live next week. We're getting to the point we're trying some new things. You're going to hear about that in a minute for the Saturdays that I may not be available, but I'll tell you about that in just a moment. March 9th, a return of one of our favorite guests, our resident bibliophile, Ann Davis East, is going to be back to talk about what's on her bookshelf. And then on March 16th, we're going to introduce you to a fascinating individual, Allison Tetrick, who is a professional bicycle racer, pavement and dirt bicycle racer, and who also, because of some bicycle crashes while she was racing, suffers from a traumatic brain injury, that she is also now an advocate and spokesperson for that cause and dealing with that. And you're going to meet Allison and hear about her career and everything about her on March 16th. And March 23rd, you're going to meet a lovely young lady who is an actor and who is also currently studying to get her master's degree in order to be a professional in the nonprofit industry, to lead theater nonprofits toward better success. And you're going to get to meet Olivia Sargent. And then this is what I was telling you about. I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks. I'm going to be traveling internationally with some family members, some of whom are here. But rather than take a 3-week hiatus, we're going to try something here. Carissa and Shalane are going to guest co-host those 3 weeks. They're going to bring their own flavor as hosts. You've met them on here before, so you know that they're going to handle it well, and their banter is going to be fantastic. But they're coming up with their own segments. They're coming up with their own topics, and we're going to be sharing those very, very soon. But you do not want to miss those 3 weeks when Carissa and Shalane are going to be your hosts for Coffee Breaks with Steve, or whatever they choose to call it for those 3 weeks. So March 30th through April 13th. So, and then we've got more that we're lining up and getting ready to present going into late April and even into May. So keep tuned for all of those. But if you have some topics that you think we should be discussing, maybe you even have some recommendations for Shalane and Carissa, guests that you would like to see, people that you may even introduce us to. Ruth Veselka was here today because she and Shalane have worked together, and Shalane made that introduction. So, you can be an influence on the topics that we discuss and the guests who appear on Coffee Breaks with Steve, and I strongly encourage you to do that. And then remember, and listen, I want to give you a challenge and a goal here. We would love to get the YouTube channel for Coffee Breaks with Steve to over 100 subscribers by the end of March. Right now, we're about a third of the way there. We don't have a huge following on there, and that's fine. I'm not looking to become famous on YouTube or through Coffee Breaks with Steve, but you see the guests and you know the topics that we're presenting, and there's so many more people who could be exposed to that and who could gain from that, and that our guests could get their story out in front of if we have more people subscribing. So what you can do is not only subscribe yourself if you have not already, and go out there and spend a little bit of time at least glancing at the videos that are out there and liking those, but also share that channel with your friends in your network and tell them why you think Coffee Breaks with Steve is worth watching. Our goal is by the end of March, over 100 subscribers, and by the end of this year to be at least over 500, because that gets the algorithms up there and more people are going to just see us pop up and see these great topics, these great episodes with these great guests. So if you would do that for me, for us, not for me, for us, that would be fantastic. And I thank you for that. All right, listen, it has been another fantastic week. I appreciate your being here around the virtual coffee table for the chat. I appreciate you taking part in this conversation. I do hope that you find these guests and these topics like shaking up Shakespeare worthwhile. And I look forward to seeing more of your comments. I look forward to seeing you back here next time. But right now, you know what I'm going to say. We all have time. We all have, no matter how busy we are, we have time. We have things that we're passionate about. We have an election year. And there's a lot going on that we can be advocating for, that we can be getting involved in, that we can be learning about, so we know how to be properly involved. We can touch other lives through our time, through our resources. So please find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.